Hey everybody, hope your December has been great so far. I'm back, and today we are going to be going over some cut content from Bioshock. Now, Bioshock went through a lot of changes in its development, and there's a lot of very detailed videos that go into how it was related to the System Shock series and how some other things during development changed, such as the entire setting, the genre really. However, that's not what we're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over some of these smaller bits of cut content that would have made it into the game as it is today. I'm saying things such as cut plasmids, changed voice lines, things along those lines, rather than what the game could have been. If you would like to see me go over that information, I would be more than happy to. I just felt like it would sort of be retreading what others have already done, and I didn't want to kind of just regurgitate that. And I hadn't seen many people talk about just the cut content from the game as it is currently and what's currently in the files. So I figured that would be a better thing for me to do with my time and something more interesting for you guys. As you guys know, I've mentioned this in my previous video, I am a college student. With my winter break coming up, I am not super certain about my uploads for some of this month. I do have a fun video planned for around Christmas that I know for a fact I'm going to get done. However, I'm not too sure about the consistency of at least this next month. However, I upload weekly, so that's like, what, one missed one? And I might be doing some like lighter topics that don't take as much like research and planning. However, I do plan on at least doing something about the recent Deck 9 layoff, since I know I'm kind of known for the Life is Strange stuff. So, yeah, so that's probably what I'll be going over. It'll be some lighter stuff. I'm thinking of maybe doing like a Life is Strange tier list type thing. I don't know. But without further ado, let's get into some cut content from Bioshock. In the beginning sequence when you're in the bathysphere, there's actually, if you look at it from the outside, a small sign underneath the bathysphere. Now, it follows you throughout the whole sequence as you go through. It doesn't have any physics or properties that would show that, for a fact, this is meant to be part of the bathysphere. So it's led me to believe that it was a placeholder or something to help measure the distance between the bathysphere and the ocean floor during that one part. Either way, it probably wasn't intended to be seen ever. It's just a small little thing that is probably just a relic of when they were planning out this whole sequence. Jeez, the wind is picking up. It was snowing earlier today. You can really hear it out there, so I apologize about that. So there are some early videos that explain the plasmids. It's in the style of the universe, and the music is the same music that's used in the bathysphere, I believe. And the other thing that's interesting is that the names of the plasmids are different. Also, the narration itself is unfiltered. So it shows that this was very early on in the planning of the plasmids. So some of the name differences include Winterblast being known as Cryo Shard, Hypnotize Big Daddy was called Befriend Big Daddy, and Target Dummy was Decoy, which it would officially become in Bioshock 2. There's actually quite a few unused plasmids. I think it's very interesting because these abilities are so integral to the game as well as the story of Rapture that hearing these early versions I think is very fascinating. There was initially a teleportation plasmid. However, this was removed because it would sort of break some of the more scripted sequences of the game, which makes total sense. And also, I could understand how it may provide certain plot holes, like why doesn't he just teleport away in this cutscene instead of, you know, whatever happened. So basically you would place a beacon and you would be able to return to it. And here's the sales pitch. Maybe I'll add in some funny little like, black and white voiceover, but I'm just gonna read the sales pitch, so. Using newly discovered genetic proximity and duplication characteristics, you can cross distances in the blink of an eye. Teleportation. Be there. So, there's my audition to do some sort of voiceover for something. I love voice acting. I've grown up doing acting. I was a theater nerd. Obviously, I think people have been able to gather that from the way I carry myself. So, if anybody needs a voice actor, contact my Twitter or my email. There was also a speed boost plasmid, which was, in development for a little bit, ended up being scrapped. It acted somewhat like the Aero Dash plasmid from Bioshock 2's multiplayer. Basically, it just allowed the player to move very quickly for a short period of time. And also, speaking of Bioshock 2's multiplayer, I can't be the only one who almost misses the era of these single-player games having some arbitrary tacked-on multiplayer mode. Like the Last of Us Factions, I believe it was called. With the first one, that multiplayer mode was actually pretty fun and pretty well done. The concept of, having to win the matches in order to bring back supplies for your people added a really fun, in-world element for it. So, and also like the first-person shooter mode for one of the Batman Arkham games. It's just kind of funny to me that back then it was just sort of a tacked-on thing, and nowadays we don't really get it as much because there's so many free-to-play multiplayer games, or games that are just developed to be multiplayer. So some of the stats for it include, it had an EVE cost of 6, it had a duration of 6 seconds, and here's the sales pitch. Feeling tired, run down, need a boost to get your work done quicker? Speed Booster is here. Splicing Speed Booster increases your efficiency beyond your imagination. Soon, that promotion will be yours. So, sounds like they're just kind of advertising Adderall. The next plasmid is actually fairly interesting. It's called Parasitic Healing. The idea is pretty interesting, and it makes sense for a game like Bioshock to have something like this. Essentially, you would be shooting an energy bolt at an enemy, doing damage to them while simultaneously healing yourself. And in this sort of hyper-capitalist, objectivist society that Rapture is, the concept of directly hurting someone else and then benefiting through gaining health fits perfectly within the tone of the world, I'd say. The EVE cost was 2, and the sales pitch is pretty short, pretty sweet. Parasitic Healing. His pain, your gain. So now we're going to get into a cut weapon from the game. The weapon that we'll be going over is called the Bio Weapon. And despite the name maybe sounding a little generic, it's actually pretty interesting. It's very similar to the Chemical Thrower, however, it used plasmids. You were able to shoot these plasmids. And these plasmids would go on to be, used by the player, obviously, but I think that concept is very interesting, loading it in like ammunition. The plasmids that were included were Insect Swarm, Berserk Toxin, Disease Cloud, and Generic Repellent. And only a specular texture map exists of the weapon. Now we're going to get into some of the unused audio from the game. So first, we'll start with Andrew Ryan. Now, there's plenty of voice lines for each of these characters. I'm sort of just picking and choosing which ones to go over. So for Andrew Ryan, we have some threats from Ryan, specifically probably to be triggered when you enter the, that area.
Is there anything you won't trade for another breath, parasite? Dignity, honor, your own identity? You've come to rob my city, but in your absence, I've studied up on you, and I wondered if there was something I could take from you. And now, I know just what it is.
This next line is recorded by a temporary voice actor. Basically, it was a placeholder for the line that would eventually go there. And I always think these are interesting because you have games like Until Dawn or other games where people who are involved from the very beginning or people who are temporary voice actors end up becoming the permanent ones. And then you have other examples like this where it's a developer who knows that, oh, this is just a placeholder and it never really goes anywhere. But it's still fascinating to me to see how these developments change over time.
It'll take her a bit to get here. In the meantime, we have to talk.
Next, we have Atlas, and the line we'll be talking about is, it's sort of unclear where it would be used. However, it's either shortly before or after the player gets the Electro Bolt.
Imagine if you could be smarter, stronger, healthier. What if you could even have amazing powers, light fires with your mind? That's what plasmids do for a man.
Next is Fontaine, and this one's actually pretty interesting. It is a line that is intended to be played at the Artemis Heights area of the game or the Apollo Square, but the fun thing about it is that it is a placeholder text-to-speech version of it, which I don't know why, I just get a kick out of that.
Whoops. It's not looking too good for you there. You're almost out of stuff. Sorry about that, but I can't have you running around here with a full tank. If it's any consolation, I don't bother icing people who I don't consider a threat.
However, the actual voiced version is nowhere to be found and presumably was never recorded. Next, Pablo Navarro. It's an alternate version of his diary from Market Maintenance Code, and it's with a different voice actor. However, due to the file name, there's some speculation that this line may not have been meant for him.
Alright, so Phil, I tracked the problem that was blocking the tubes here, and you'll never believe where I ended up. The damn farmer's market, clear on the other side of Rapture. I fixed it right up and installed some new gaskets. They keep their shit in terrible shape over there. Anyway, the code is 0512 if you ever need to get back in there to do maintenance.
The opening cutscene where you're on the plane was actually much longer initially. It's actually pretty interesting. So there's some voice lines from the pilot as well as another character, and the stewardess you can hear in the background. However, it's only in the background, and the others were removed.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. Excuse me, sir, your tray table. Would you kindly...
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Cal Franklin. It seems we have a bit of a problem.
We're losing altitude really fast. Looks like oversped number 1 and 3. There's smoke coming out of the panel and... I got it! Pull up! Pull up! I got it! Pull up!
And finally, we're going to go over the censored version of the game that released in China. We've gone over the regional differences of some games, specifically when I did my Resident Evil video. However, the changes in the Chinese version of Bioshock were too absurd for me to ignore. Typically, I don't really go over these because it's just like, oh, they cut a scene a few seconds shorter, you know? But this is just kind of fascinating. The funny thing is, these changes actually break the gameplay in a lot of cases. So, I'll just read off this list here. Enemy corpse wounds were removed and were replaced with a box in about 3 seconds from when they were killed. Because all corpses are pretty much removed, the research camera doesn't work. All blood has been removed from the game, the pipe wrench is now invisible, enemy corpses cannot be picked up with telekinesis, text with political content is now extremely vague to avoid actual, political ideas, which is kind of missing the entire point of the game because it's about, And the character Suchong, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, it's been a while since I played this game, was deliberately translated to not look Chinese. The atom substance inside the syringe is now blue instead of red. And also, once again, since all corpses are removed, telekinesis is pretty much useless. There are 2 clips that have been added to the game's boot video. One is healthy gaming advice, and the other is a disclaimer stating that the game content is purely fictional and for entertainment purposes only, which is a little self-explanatory. And also, all of the hacksaws and blades tend to appear like they're just floating in the air because all of the corpses have been removed. So I just kind of thought that the cut content from this Chinese version of the game was just too absurd to ignore. I thought it was fascinating and kind of fun to look at because I can't imagine my first experience of this game being without many things that make it it. The environmental storytelling through the corpses, the political messaging, the telekinesis plasmid. So all in all, I just thought that was a worthy inclusion to this video. And that's going to be it for the cut content of Bioshock. I appreciate every single one of you watching. I know this video was a little quicker, but I didn't want to, once again, retread the sort of development cycle of this game from, back when it was related to System Shock a little more and some of the changes in the enemy types, things like that. So we're just going over, what we went over. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. So have a good morning or evening or, whatever.